afternoon and welcome to the Civil Service Commission meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner GHAZARIAN?
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Yes.
Chair Manoukian?
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Yagubian is absent.
Okay. What's next?
Minutes for the meeting of January 11, 2017.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion second. Can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner GHAZARIAN?
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Yes.
Chair Manoukian?
Yes. Okay. What's next?
Oral communications.
I have no cards. And what's next?
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is your monthly recruitment and examination workload status report. You've seen this report many times. It contains all the recruitments that are currently active, the department, the filing periods, dates of any exam, and of course the members of the staff who are working on those processes. Appears to be pretty large quantity right now. We've been hovering around 50. We're at 67, and I'm not sure why we're in that situation, but you know, at the end of the calendar year, we do see a lot of retirements and people separating, and so it's probably an indication of that. You will note there's a couple new names on this list. Staff members Anid Navarro and Ando Vardanian, who you both know, and they've both recently been promoted to human resources assistant positions, and they're going to be chipping in, helping out on recruitment matters for the next part of their careers. So anyway,
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay, I see none. What's next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this too is a note and file item. These are the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting, which was in January. As you can see, pretty busy times. Even most of these occurred in January, which tends to be a slower time coming off the holidays, but nevertheless, staff is very busy. 10 lists have been established. 3 of them were open recruitments, 6 of them promotional, and 1 of them was the promotional and open process. As you can see, various numbers of applications received. On the open recruitments, you tend to have larger numbers, and then on the far right column, you have the number of people who made it through all of the processes and made it onto our list. So. Again, if you have any questions on any of those items, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, this is a note and file item.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions? Anyone? Seems like everyone's okay. Okay. What's next?
Class specification for approval.
I have a request. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I have a request because of a time issue, to move number 11. Was that correct, Mr. Doyle?
That's correct.
Number 11 is the
Yes.
one? Okay. To go next. If that's okay with my fellow commissioners? Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Class specification for approval, Community Forest Supervisor.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a specification for a new classification.
What page is that? I'm sorry.
Page 48.
48?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is the title is Community Forest Supervisor. This is within the forestry section of the Public Works Mechanical Maintenance section, and at the tail end of this item there is an org chart attached, as they are with all of these. Really, this position is newly established following the 2008-2009 recession. The person who had been previously running forestry left. It was either resignation or retirement. But given the budgetary situation at the time, we chose not to fill that position for all those years. We got by with the Deputy Director of Public Works, Mr. Hargrove, essentially running that program. He happens to have very good qualifications in urban forestry, so we did that. But really, it is one of 5 major subdivisions within Public Works field operations that he's in charge of, and we felt that it was appropriate to really have a supervisor overseeing this program and the 7 employees who are handling our urban forestry program. As you know, this is a community that takes its trees very, very seriously, and this is responsible for both the parkway trees and the city's very restrictive indigenous tree ordinance, which touches upon people's private property as well. So there's a lot of public contact in this job, and we felt that a supervisory level position or classification is necessary. So that's this item. If you have questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. We do have Mr. Galanian is here, Director of Public Works, and Mr. Hargrove, our Deputy Director of Public Works, and Ms. Navarro from my staff has worked on this specification as well.
Okay. Any questions? I see none. Do I have a motion?
So move for approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call, please? Let the record show that Commissioner Yakupin has joined us.
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner GHAZARIAN,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian,
Yes.
Chair Manukian.
Yes. Okay. What's next?
Class specification for approval, Park Operations Supervisor.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, similar to the previous item, this is a specification for a new classification. This is within our Community Services and Parks Department, the Park Operations Supervisor. This is a combination of various functions that are really typically staffed by hourly employees in our parks, very often on the weekends. This will be a salaried position. It's handling facility management, oversight of various parks, scheduling staff, park maintenance, overseeing the caretaker program, as well as the community garden program, and enforcing park rules and policies. Again, it's a kind of an interesting mix of both programming as well as the park maintenance, and really what we consider to be a good opportunity for promotion for some of our hourly staff. So again, this is an item that is here for your approval. The specification is attached. Mr. Bulanikian, our Parks Director, is here, as is Ms. Abramian from my staff, if you have questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions? I see none. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner GHAZARIAN,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian,
Yes.
Chair Manukian.
Yes. What's next?
Class specification for approval, Homeless Program Series.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a revision of an existing class series for homeless programs, and this is a very, very active, increasingly active program within our Community Services and Parks Department. It's to service our what's called the continuum of care efforts within our Glendale community. When this series was established back in 2012, I think we erred in one respect in setting forth the minimum requirements for the coordinator level of this as requiring 2 years of experience in a homeless service program. We'd really, frankly, like to broaden that experience requirement to give other opportunities and for people who have backgrounds in human service and social service programs here, particularly of our existing staff. People with experience with some of the senior programs, some of the youth programming, social work, Section 8 housing, low-income housing, those types of backgrounds, I think, would be a good feeder into this program. Again, it would broaden our pool and really open this up to more people with different levels of exposure to these human service type programs. So that's what the recommendation would be specifically on the coordinator level, and then there are other minor changes throughout the specification that would update this from the time it was initially established back in 2012. So again, if you have questions on this particular item, be happy to try and answer them. We have Ms. Abramian from my staff, Mr. Bulanikian is here, and Mr. Bulaniki is it. So.
Not here.
All right. Any questions? I see none. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner GHAZARIAN,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian,
Yes.
Chairman Ukian.
Yes. What's next?
Class specification for approval, Public Works Management Analyst Series and Public Works Administrative Series.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is one item, but two series within the public works profession. Really what we're seeing here, it's a specialized series for public works management analysts and the administrative series. Really excellent career ladder for people within the public works profession. It starts at the assistant level, is an associate level analyst, and then senior analyst. This is the kind of specialized knowledge and skill that really needed in a field such as this. When Mr. Galanian took over as Director of Public Works a few years back, he took over from Mr. Zern, and Mr. Zern did bring with him some key members of the staff to Water and Power, and I think Mr. Galani is still trying to build his team, and I think this series will help him build and develop that team. So again, if you have questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Mr. Galanian is here, as is Mr. Nersessian from my staff. So.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call?
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner GHAZARIAN,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian,
Yes.
Chairman Ukian.
Yes. Next item, please.
Class specification for approval, Risk and Insurance Services Analyst.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, once again, this is a new classification within the risk management unit of our City Attorney's Office. This is an analyst level position. Similar to the previous one, and even more so, risk management is a definite specialty area. We have developed our staff internally and really offer this position as a potential promotional opportunity. This position will be handling professional and administrative duties, which there are a lot of in this particular field, and really assists. The way we're currently structured, free up our risk manager to be more visible on some loss prevention, safety, and other risk management functions. And again, this person would handle most of the office and administrative work in that field. So, again, that would be the intent here. Again, this is a specification for your approval. We have Mike Garcia from our city attorney is here, Ms. Maurer, who's the chief assistant city attorney, and once again, Ms. Abramian from my staff, who helped put this together. So.
Okay. Any questions? I see none. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner GHAZARIAN,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian,
Yes.
Chairman Ukian.
Yes. Next item, please.
Class specification for approval, Legal Fellow and Public Hearing. Adoption of resolution. Report on unclassified status proposal for Legal Fellow.
Okay. Mr. Dorr.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, there's actually two items here. One would be a request for the approval of a new specification, as you've had several tonight. The second part of it would be declaring a declaration of this position as an unclassified position or classification. What this is, a legal fellow, is really a means to provide entry-level opportunity for a career in municipal law. And it's really designed to be of limited duration, maybe a 1 to 2 year type of assignment for either a recent law school graduate or a new attorney. Right now, the way City Attorney's series is set up is it starts out with a deputy city attorney, then it goes to assistant, and then on from there. The deputy city attorney really has no experience requirement. It is truly an entry level, but oftentimes we hire people that rarely have that kind of municipal government experience. And so the idea here is to create sort of that preparatory training opportunity that's kind of missing right now. The position, not that this commission has any purview over pay items or anything like that, but the salary would be set below the deputy city attorney for obvious reasons. And that would be the intent. The second half of this would be the request to make this an unclassified position. And again, Mr. Garcia could probably explain it better than I, but really, as I understand it, the workload within the city attorney's office fluctuates depending upon a lot of things, development activity, and right now they're currently in a situation where they have a lot of work to do in it's called the transactional and department services area, not so much in litigation, but in that area, and that's where they would have the greater need for legal services right now. Departments that would be affected by this would be community development, public works, and a lot of them that deal with development and building. The idea behind this again would be, offer some level of flexibility for depending on where the specific need is, and if there is no need for it, if the workload does slow down, that we'd have the ability to either move this person to one area or the other, or release this person from employment. And I think that's really the main purpose of requesting this to be unclassified. The report does address a prior request that the City Attorney's Office made last fall relating to an unclassified Deputy City Attorney position. This has really nothing to do with that. This is a completely separate thing. That position was in fact filled, I believe, a month or so ago, and that whole idea is dead. So. Anyway, with that, as I said, Mr. Garcia is here, Ms. Maurer is here, Ms. Abramyan from my staff, and if we can answer your questions on this, be happy to do so.
Okay, I'm going to open up the public record. One thing, just a quick comment that I have, which, I'm sorry. I'm sorry?
Public hearing.
Public hearing, okay? Before I open the public hearing, one of the things that I noticed in here, which I'm glad to see in a sense that every time the economy in the past has moved in the wrong direction, we've cut away from resources to the planning department. And, because when the economy turns around, this backlog that is created with the permitting process, and I sure hope that this is going to be one of the ways that, whatever the outcome is, that it's going to help the planning department get some of those backlogs at least resolved, because I can tell you, just based on my experience, there's a big backlog as far as so many things for the entitlement process. And I'm hoping that this at least is going in the right direction if this is going to solve that issue. So we've opened the public hearing process. Who are we hearing from, Mr. Doyle? Are we hearing from anybody? Or are we going to questions right now?
I think we can go to questions unless
Okay.
Mr. Garcia wants to say anything.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
I have questions.
You have questions? This would be the time.
It says that this specification is modeled after a similar position in the city of Palo Alto. And perhaps if I can have Mr. Garcia come up.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
How are you, Mr. Garcia?
Good, thank you, member.
Let me just preface what I'm about to ask with the following comment. I really have no interest in telling you how to run your department. These documents that have been provided to us, it references that the specification is modeled after a similar position in the city of Palo Alto. And in looking at the city of Palo Alto's legal fellow invitation that they had released back in October of 2016, I read it, and indeed it does. Ours seems to be similar. The only thing that I did not find in that specification or that announcement was the reference that that position is unclassified versus classified. So I don't know if that position was unclassified in Palo Alto, and I confess I'm not sure whether or not a position being unclassified versus classified is one that called for that clarification that seems to be made, or a reference by way of additional background about this not being a substitute for something else, because I think I missed that Civil Service Commission meeting. So that was...
I think that's correct.
Yeah, that's the first time I've seen it, where it seems this body had denied an earlier request for something else. And I appreciate that this is being presented openly and candidly without not mentioning the previous scenario, lest someone think that it is that scenario revisited or repackaged. So perhaps if you can keep in mind my concerns. My concerns are whether City of Palo Alto did it unclassified versus classified, because it sure would be nice if they did it unclassified. It makes me feel like there's some precedent in terms of hiring someone full-time, putting them in a position where they may very well end up being a deputy city attorney or an assistant city attorney for the city of Glendale within the course of their fellowship, because they may start as a former judicial clerk or a current last-year student from an accredited school. And I assume that when we're talking about accredited schools, we're always meaning to say California and ABA, because in one place it does, and another place it just says accredited without the reference. So I have more inquiries to make, but do you care to address that initial?
Sure. Thank you, members of the commission. Specifically, Palo Alto's, I can't answer specifically whether it was, how it was termed classified or unclassified. I do know in the invitation it was specifically for a 2-year position only.
Yes.
So the only way that could happen in Glendale to have a position that's time limited, as far as I understood, is to make it unclassified. And so I was trying to model it after there, whether it's 1 year or 2 year. We do want to take it on as we go on a case-by-case basis. I just want to provide a little additional background to Mr. Doyle's report, which accurately summarized our reasons. I will tell you, in 2011, when I became the city attorney, we had 14 full-time positions, and now we have 11. And when we had to reduce our enforce, and we did that across the board, as you're all quite aware. The number of attorneys that were dedicated to the community development department, all the functions that it does, was 3 attorneys, and the number of attorneys that we had dedicated to public works was 2. Now we're down to 2 for CDD and 1 for public works. And so we've had to, initially we have absorbed that work within the department. We spread around where we can, but we've had to absorb it, and we initially were able to accommodate all that work. But as Mr. Doyle indicated, as the economy has recovered, both for public works in terms of capital projects, and to Mr. Mnuchin's point, the amount of private development in the city has increased significantly. And like anything else, with the planners, the buildings, the building inspectors, with our operation in the transactional or departmental services department, our workload has increased, and we do need that additional support. We want to be able to assess, and I had this conversation with the city manager's office. We do want to be able to assess whether that is a long-term need that going forward that I need to fill it with a deputy position, or if it's something short-term given just the amount of projects we have currently in the pipeline. And so that's really the reason why we're here.
And this legal fellow is going to primarily or exclusively work in public works?
I think it's for Department of Services, and it'll be primarily for community development and public works.
Because in the Palo Alto scenario, they're referencing the legal fellow appearing in courts on pitches motions and things of that sort.
I don't see that happening. It could be because it will be a licensed attorney, obviously, so they could pitch in to go to on a code enforcement case or on pitches or something like that. But it will be someone who, as I envision it, dedicated to those functions, because that's where we have the most need. I'm actually disappointed Mr. Galani left, because he would agree. He'd be nodding his head if he were here.
Waiting 8 months just for vacating an alley.
So my initial question was seeking the clarification of a paragraph, which the second portion of the third paragraph, Mr. Doyle, this is primarily for you initially. We say the paragraph beginning in order to address, correct? So we say applicants could include final year law students, judicial clerks, and law school graduates waiting for the bar results, provided they must have graduated or ended clerkships prior to the date of commencement of work. Well, clearly what we're saying is we don't want people clerking for a judge and also coming and being here, right? Is that what we're talking about? We just want exclusivity for someone to just dedicate their time in this legal fellow position.
And if I may, also saying that at the time they apply, they may be in their final year but not yet licensed, or be clerking and not yet licensed, but at the time they come to start to work for us, they'll be both licensed and working for us exclusively. That's correct.
Right. Okay. Now, and the clerkships, which we're referring to as clerkships, are we referring to them understanding it to be only judicial clerkships, or clerkships in the District Attorney's Office of LA County or Public Defender's Office or anywhere?
It was intended as judicial clerkships, but it could be any clerkship. I mean, in reality, anybody that's, serving an internship or a clerkship and ready to start practicing law.
Okay.
It does say judicial clerks.
One place it says judicial, and another place it talks about ended clerkships. Because applicants could include final year law students, judicial clerks, and law school graduates. And that's why I kind of got hung up on ended clerkships, meaning is that only judicial clerkships? Because it seems to me, as you said, and I agree with you, that it should be any clerkship. Because a person who acquires the training and skill in a clerkship, whether it be for a bench officer or elsewhere, is just as good for the city attorney's office if they're qualified.
And the person serving the clerkship will also most likely be either the recent law school graduate or our
not a first-year law student, clearly. Correct. I hope not.
Correct.
Right. Now, the
While he's looking for that.
Yes, go ahead.
The correct explanation of a legal fellow, how would you what's the best way to explain, what does that word mean?
Someone who's obviously educated in the law and ready to practice law. It is a unique position, no doubt. And so when we were looking for options to fill the need that we had, we came upon this, and it seemed to fit what we were looking for.
Okay. Would they have to have passed the bar?
By the time they start working for us, yes. Actually, I take that back. They can start working for us if they're waiting bar results.
Okay.
And I think the way we've written the spec, or the way we may write the ultimate job bulletin, would be, after the first time, then it's within the city's discretion whether to let that person go if they're not able to successfully pass the bar.
Okay.
Here's what I had a problem with, if I may continue.
Sure.
On page 42, Mr. Doyle, we have 3 bullet points where we begin, among other things, the legal fellow's job duties include. In the second bulletin point, when we're saying assisting in the preparation and provision of legal advice to city council, boards and commissions and city officials and staff, I'm okay with that because it says assisting in the preparation, so I'm assuming a licensed attorney, if the fellow is not licensed yet, a licensed attorney is supervising, and therefore that is referenced as assisting. After the comma, and reviews and interprets federal, state, county, and city constitutions, and then goes on, I'm assuming, and I'm asking if I'm wrong in my assumption, that we also mean assisting in that area as opposed to reviewing, he or she, and interpreting. Because I'm uncomfortable, frankly, with a law student interpreting something of that sort unilaterally.
Secretary, can I make just a quick comment?
Sure.
Do you mind if I interject for
Go
1
ahead,
second here?
Yeah.
I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off. I am just very confused. Why don't we just say entry-level first year or second year attorney to cut through all of these? I mean, like, they have to be an attorney to get started. I wouldn't feel comfortable any of these things being done by somebody who's not an attorney. If they're going to be giving commission advice, there's going to be sitting in a meeting.
But they can't start it until they're not, I mean, that was my
Well,
understanding.
they can start. Let me try to break it down as we see it. The way it would work is if the person is waiting bar results, then they would be assisting because they can't by law provide legal advice or do legal work. I understand your position.
No, I think you're on my page. You're on my page, Mr. Garcia. Let me interrupt you, because all I wanted was a clarification. I've saved my most concerning point for last, and I haven't gotten to it.
But sorry, Albert, I didn't mean to cut you off. But I think Albert's got a point. Continue what you were saying.
I just don't understand.
That is my last point, Albert. Let me just run the gamut. Let me just run the gamut. So, look, I get it. I think the city attorney's office is just as entitled as I am as a private practitioner to have a law clerk, to have what we refer to interns or legal fellows. And yes, my understanding, Mr. Chair, of a fellow is a person who has a start date and has an end date. A fellow is not an employee, ad nauseum indefinitely. That's why we have fellows. We have different fellows in different sectors in the legal profession. I'm intimately familiar with it, actually. So if we're going to do that, I'm going to ask for the, not the wisdom, but the legal precedent for doing that, because here comes my last point. My last point is what Commissioner Abkarian was pointedly inquiring about, and that is for a staff, as you said, that used to have 14 attorneys and now it's down to 11, fully staffed, but really understaffed. Why not have a 12th attorney and bring somebody on board? But there may be a reason, and that's why I started my inquiry and engagement with you with saying, I don't want to tell you how to run your department, but these are concerns or questions that beg to be asked. So why a legal fellow versus an associate? And if a legal fellow, where is the appropriateness in making that legal fellow unclassified? Is it because if we make them classified and then vested in civil service rights and whatnot that comes with it, then really we're hiring them for a longer period of time? That's not really a fellow anymore. It ceases to be a fellow. That's it.
Commissioner Yacobian has a good question too. And I think, doesn't that go back to the point of the whole point is his ability to be able to terminate that position once the economy, I just want to make sure I understand.
If I may, members of the commission, and that is an excellent point. And if it was just up to me, if I made all the budgetary decisions, I would hire the attorney. But I don't. I have to go through the process with the city manager's office and then ultimately get the council to approve the position. Since we've had the reduction of force since the 11 or 12 or 12 or 13, there's been very tight controls on adding new positions. So the city manager's office felt comfortable doing this so that we could assess it again. And I do believe we'll probably end up there, but I don't know. We really do need to assess is this a long-term need, or are we going to be able to basically address the crunch in a short amount of time and then just go back to 11 attorneys?
Can we hire, you the city attorney, can you, the city, hire a legal fellow and leave he or she without civil service protections, if you will?
If this position is created, yes.
And it would not run afoul of the charter or any of the...
In my view, no. And that's why we followed this process to come get the commission's approval to create this position.
All right. I have no further questions.
Yeah,
Albert, did you, yeah, go ahead.
I just have a quick question. Something that Mr. Doyle said struck me, that the workload fluctuates, and which is a completely normal thing. So my question is, does the city attorney's office have the ability to hire hourly workers? I mean, so that they're not committed to any sort of a time period? Is that
we
even
do.
within the realm of possibility?
Commissioner Kubian, yes, we do, and we have done that from time to time. I will tell you, our experience is it's a little bit more hit and miss with an hourly than it is with at least, and it is new. This would be new to us, but we think hiring somebody that's at least for a year or two, there'll be some stability on their end, knowing that they're going to be here for a certain amount of time, and there's stability on our end, knowing we're going to have an attorney working or someone who's waiting bar results working for us full time. Hourlies are subject to overtime restrictions. They usually, when they find a job that's not hourly, they'll leave and go to that. There's less of a commitment on their end to that, and so we wanted something a little bit more stability, but yet at the same time with some flexibility to make decisions down the road.
But I would imagine that would give you sort of some added flexibility, and when you have the workload, you can hire 1, 2, 3 people to take care of it without having to go through this. And when you don't, then you're not obligated.
I would tell you, if it was just a matter of hourly or contract work where you can give them an assignment and say, go do this and bring us back a work product like a memo or go to court, that's probably true. In this case, the attorneys that work with the departments really work hand in hand with them. So I find it's very useful for them to be here all the time, to be able to work with the departments without additional cost to us. That's why we're doing it. We looked at all those options. We did consider the hourly route, but I think that this is something that gives us. I mean, they're really. I can't over stress the amount of work that Public Works and CDD is generating right now that we need to address. And I think in this moment, hourlies is not going to cut it.
Yeah, but you're kind of saying, you're saying two sides of the same coin. If there is that much work, then you should get a new position. I mean, you should get, if you went from 14 to 11, go back up to 12 or 13. I mean, I think that's justified.
But it all goes away when the economy tanks.
Yeah, but you can't constantly do this. I mean, what's the purpose of a civil service commission and, classified position if you're at the whim of the economy every 2 minutes?
No, I understand, but that's why the City Council has already approved this.
You have no budget for this. Is that what you said to us?
I don't have a long-term budget for it.
You don't have a budget to hire an attorney.
Let me finish my question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Has council already approved this position or no?
They approve the title next week.
Yes.
Okay, so they haven't. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll yield to Albert, to Commissioner Aparian.
I just have this nagging thing in the back of my mind. If you're hiring clerks, they should be just hourly employees, if that's what you're hiring them for. And I think there's a legitimate reason to hire clerks to do some background work for you, and I don't have any problems with that. My understanding is that this is something that's more going to morph into a licensed attorney coming in and sitting in a commission or helping out or doing other things as a licensed attorney once with this title. Was that not my understanding?
Correct, for the time period that they're employed as a legal fellow, whether it's a 1 year or 2 year appointment.
Correct, whatever time it is.
Yes.
First of all, unclassified employees could be there for 20 years. We've seen some for 30 years that were unclassified employees in housing division, and they stayed on unclassified for 20 years.
That would be my intent. I mean, when we go out to advertise for it, it would be very clear. We'd be making clear in the advertisement. We haven't decided yet, but whether it's 1 year or 2 years.
So I don't have any problems with that. I think maybe because you're trying to kind of fit a peg in a hole that it's not going, maybe that's probably the problem that I'm having. I think you need to have a classification for clerks where you hire them on an hourly basis. Then you don't really need to come in here to have us approve anything. But if you're coming here for us to approve an unclassified attorney position, then all this other language in reference to a clerk that before they go to law school, then they come in here, then maybe they're attorneys, maybe they're not attorneys. I think it's completely irrelevant. If they're clerks, you hire them on an hourly basis. If they're basically going to be attorneys, entry-level attorneys coming in as a fellow, and they understand they're unclassified, then why don't we just say that they're going to be attorneys as unclassified employees, called fellow, legal fellow, or whatever you want to call it. And then this way, then you have flexibility of having hourly employees as law clerks, and you can have the fellow that everyone understands has to be an attorney, no one else that would come in and fill this position.
I think, and that's a good point, and I think the only thing I'd say to that is we wanted the flexibility to start the process where someone's either serving another clerkship or in law school and maybe awaiting bar results, so they can start as the fellow before they've gotten their bar results. There's a lot of work that I think someone who is awaiting bar results can do that's almost in the legal realm, but they can't practice law, they can't give advice.
What happens if that person doesn't pass the bar? Then?
No, I know. And, well, I think what we would do is we would assess, a lot of the like the fellowship in Palo Alto, for example, they've very clearly spelled out that I think at the second time taking the bar, if they don't pass and that's subject to termination, I'd be looking at something to.
But I mean, you're going like a year getting that person in that position when they're not attorneys. For 1 year, you have to wait until they get the second time they pass, and they still don't pass. You still, for a year, have a person who's just not licensed who cannot help you with some of these things, which I mean, I want some attorney to come in and help you. Listen, I don't want to run your business in any way, shape, or form. You know how many people you need. I think you need another 3 full-time employees. If I was a city council, I would approve it. But what I think there's a morphing of 2 different jobs. I don't want to have somebody coming in and taking the bar 2 times and us waiting a year and that person filling this position and then having this position not go to someone who's a first-year attorney. I mean, I want that person to be an attorney, not waiting to be an attorney in a year, because what we need is an attorney to give advice on different things. And that person who's giving advice, if they're not attorneys, their level of expectation from them is a whole lot lower than somebody who's actually passed the bar exam.
I don't disagree. All I'll say is we were just trying to broaden the applicant pool a little bit. That's all.
And from what I'm hearing, and Albert has a legitimate point, but these are several different points. I think one, if I hear from what Albert is saying, is you're okay with it as long as the person that we're hiring is a licensed attorney.
That's it.
Okay.
Licensed attorney?
By the time they're
saying.
hired, they have to be a licensed attorney, like a first-year attorney or whatever they want to be.
And then I see Albert's point in a sense of, do you have a problem making those changes to make or to give a time?
Because if they come in as a clerk, they're hired as a clerk,
Right.
and then they don't pass the bar,
Then they have to take it
then they
again.
have to take it the second time, and the
Right.
requirement is if you don't pass it the second time, we won't hire you anymore, you're out. That basically, it's a year and a half down the road. They're working at that position, which should have been filled by a first-year attorney, so to speak.
This is where I was, may I?
Well, we can get a first-year attorney to fill this position. I
This
mean, there's
is-
so many first-year attorneys who want this job.
Is
For
it
us to hire a clerk
is
to
it
fill it for a year and
unrealistic?
a half doesn't make any sense.
Is it unrealistic to put a provision in there that this person within the first 6 months of employment must either be licensed or
I would say at the time when you hire someone, they have to be a licensed attorney.
So just to be clear, what you're suggesting is at the time they start, they have to be licensed.
100%.
But then this is not this legal fellow, because this legal fellow.
This is exactly what I said. I said
Right.
you're trying to morph 2 positions into one. A clerk's position, which is an hourly position, and an entry-level attorney's position, which is what we need, into a position in here, which doesn't work.
And where I'm at on this is a legal fellow who is an intern, third-year law student, former judicial clerk or some other clerk who comes and becomes the legal fellow of the City of Glendale City Attorney's Office, one who has not passed the bar examination or even taken it. I suppose it's fine for that person to be an unclassified person. My concern is when we are allocating and saying that this person shall have the same rights, powers, duties, and immunities of a city prosecutor, my question to you, Mr. Garcia, is that okay to have someone with the same rights and then potentially, as Mr. Abkarian, Commissioner Abkarian says, someone who morphs into a city prosecutor or city attorney to be lacking civil service protection or classification? If it's okay, as you say, according to the charter and your understanding of it, then I don't know why the civil service needs to give its blessing or approval. I'm missing
I think
that.
the approval of the unclassified position, whether we call it a deputy,
I see.
unclassified
Okay.
deputy or
Versus
legal fellow,
unclassified.
that requires the
I think
commission.
we haven't
I will
heard
note-
from, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
Finish, and I'd like to hear what Commissioner Devine.
And with respect to the prosecutor, again, what the actual spec says is that it has to be, if licensed, then can act as city prosecutor. So in those roles where it's actually acting as an attorney, whether it's as a prosecutor or as litigator or as an advisor to any city official, that requires the person to be
And I'm
licensed.
going to yield to my esteemed colleague to my right, reminding you that what you said to us, and I'm taking that to heart, and that is that you don't have that green light from the city manager's office to go hire somebody and make them a classified employee at this time. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Please.
Okay.
Please.
Now that the attorneys have spoken, I'm going to approach it from a more simplistic standpoint. Just what I believe our duty here is, as commissioners, to make sure that the hiring and removal of employees is done under a civil service system. And I think Commissioner Yakubian really hit the nail on the head when she asked about the hourly employees. To me, the way this is worded and the concept of it, and again, I agree with the three attorneys that are talking about the duties and where they should be or shouldn't be. I believe what trumps that is the fact that you're asking this commission to allow people to be hired and or removed without going through a civil service process. They don't have the civil service protection when if they're hired as a unclassified, and they don't have the protection. Somebody looking for a job or filling a position doesn't have the right to, or the equal right, the level playing field in applying for that position. So my take on this and the position I would be going with is that the position would not be unclassified. Now, I understand what you just mentioned to Commissioner GHAZARIAN about you don't have the funds or the permission from the city manager's office to fill a position as a classified position. You have to get that budgeted. My feeling is, and this goes back to what Commissioner Manukian said about the backlog in the different departments, the planning department, public works. There's a problem there. We've heard of that from many people. And I think that would be a great case to go back to the city manager and say, look, we're running into backlogs, we're running into problems. Let's get a classified position. Go to city council, I'm sure they'll give it to you, and hire it and put it in as a legal civil service project. And I feel that's the way it should be done. This work here, and the thing that really raised a red flag for me, because I was here when we ruled on that earlier request by the city attorney's office to have an unclassified position, and basically that raised a red flag because when I read this and understood based on what I'm hearing today that this is pretty much the same thing that's happening now that you wanted to do back then when this commission rejected it. So make a long story short, I will not support the unclassified position. I would really support the concept that Commissioner Yakubian brought forth about hiring an hourly employee to fill the gap and allow you to do your analysis on how many people you need and whether you need this person or that person. And failing that, then again, I think you have a great case based on the backlogs that Mr. Manukian brought up in many departments to go to the city manager and say, approve this position, let's classify it, let's go through the civil service process and hire somebody according to the civil service rules.
Let me just make a couple of things, at least my comments. I think, first of all, we should not be telling you how to run your department, period. That's my opinion, and I think everybody feels that way. But I think we also should find a way of helping our city attorney achieve what he needs. He's been given certain parameters to work with. Now, I hear all sides on this. I think we should consider. I see his point of just hiring a part-time individual or an hourly individual. you're not going to be able to compete in the job market out there and convince someone to come and do what qualify for that position. And I really think we should explore an option or a way to address some of these. Having him go back to the city manager I think that's something that's already been vetted. I mean, it is my understanding that the reason he's here is he's been given some parameters to work with, and if there's a way that we can find a way to.
I just have a comment. I think that there's a confusion. I don't have, unlike Commissioner Devine, and I remember when this originally came to us, I don't think this is that position morphed into this. I
don't think so either.
That's been filled. I'm sorry, that's been filled already.
Yeah, it's been filled already. No, I'm not even. I don't. Now it's very clear now in the language. My idea was that we should have, and I don't have a problem with having an unclassified attorney fill this position during the period where you need this person to do the attorney work and fill the attorney needs that you have in the city, in the permit division, in the planning division, as an attorney to give it ideas. I am not feeling comfortable with hiring someone as a clerk which has no indication that they're going to pass the bar exam within the first 6 months or within the first year. I know you said maybe we can say after the second time they don't pass it, then they'll be able to be terminated. I don't feel comfortable giving them that kind of a latitude. I think you should just say entry-level, first-year unclassified attorney.
If I hear correctly, so Albert, what you're saying is you're able to support it as long as this person is licensed attorney.
Entry-level, first-year attorney. Yes.
I would be able to support that too.
If you want to give the rest of the staff support, then you hire hourly clerks to basically give them support.
Do you have a problem with that?
I don't.
Okay, so let me understand this. So in the hearing in the fall of 2016, which I was not present, this commission denied that request and felt uncomfortable that the classified position at that time was being left open in the event the recently departed, I assume there was a recently departed person at that time, recently departed incumbent returned, which then this memorandum says that position was filled, right? So
that's not an issue.
Am I to understand that then at that time the commission felt uncomfortable leaving some position, bringing it in unclassified person who then maybe would be free to go and come?
We were told that position is being open
for
to see if this gentleman is going out of the country if he wants to come back and fill back.
It was a totally different scenario.
Completely a different scenario.
Okay, so it was not I just don't want this body.
It has nothing to do with this situation.
If I may finish. If I may finish. I just don't want this commission to be inconsistent from the fall to January or February. Other than that, I am hearing Commissioner Abkarian, I'm hearing you, Chair Manoukian, suggest that
we'll support it as long as
support this
attorney
position, and you can call it legal fellow or entry-level attorney position, and it sounds to me that it's even perhaps better because then at least two commissioners, and perhaps more, are suggesting that you should have more qualified help than one who is not yet tested by the rigorous California bar examination testing, if you will. So an entry-level attorney. I have no problem supporting that. At the end of the day, I don't want you to leave here, have more work, but less help. So if that's what will solve the issue.
I would just say entry-level or newer attorney because it could be someone who's been out for a year or two.
All right. Okay. Will you, if I closed it, now I'm going to sorry.
Let's just amend it first.
We need to establish some parameters as to what we're talking about. And I know each of you had different concerns, but the options we would have is to pass this as a legal fellow, but modify the minimum requirements to say you must be a licensed attorney as opposed to last year of law school or whatever it is, or approval of a unclassified deputy city attorney. I don't know if that would even be an option.
I'm not sure what it would be. We'd have to
reopen and re-agendize.
I would like to keep the legal fellow position for my fellow commissioners' ears because because perhaps I'm intimately familiar with it, because I know that illegal fellows come into a fellowship and they know that that's not a 25-year career they're coming into. It may become that. That's between you and them down the line. But
To answer Mr. Doyle's question, yes. Basically, everything stays the same except the requirement changes to be a licensed attorney at the time they're being hired. Correct?
Yeah, and I would like to actually comment on something that Commissioner GHAZARIan brought up earlier, because I think you just got me thinking. Last time, the reasons why it was unclassified were very different. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people were not comfortable with that. But the fact that it was unclassified for, again, similar to this for a 1 year or 2 year term, I mean, that is all similar. Yeah. So I don't know how many people voted, based on which reason, but I just don't want to misstate, or have you misunderstand what happened last time. So okay. In effect, it is similar. They are both temporary positions for a young attorney, let's say, without civil service protection. I mean, that doesn't change. And with that, I will make my apologies and excuse myself. I needed to leave about 15 minutes ago. I'm sorry.
No problem. And that just made me more uncomfortable.
I was going to suggest that since there are so many open questions that we delay deciding this because there's amendments, there's questions.
No,
but
let me clarify something.
Motion.
Okay. One person at a time. Yes.
You want to close the public?
No, I still want to talk. Okay. I'll close it. Oh, please. Okay.
But you did not make, did she make a motion?
No. GARO, hold on one second.
Okay.
Just
he
as a
he hasn't closed the discussion yet for a motion to be made.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yes, thank you.
Bye-bye. Just to follow up what she was saying was, they're similar, but they're not. And one of the reasons, the main reasons, at least for that case, I don't think applies here, is that specific case, there was a question of the position being held open for if that person wants to return. So I don't think these are the same thing.
Yeah, they're not the same at all.
If I hear correctly, I'm going to close the public session, and Albert, you make your motion.
My motion is to leave the entire...
I'm closing the public section. Go ahead.
Public hearing. My motion would be to keep it exactly the same, except with the requirements to be that at the time of the hire, the person has to be a licensed attorney. Okay. However you want to do it, 1 year or 2 years, whatever the city attorney's office decides, whatever qualifications they want. At the time of the hire, they have to be a licensed attorney in California.
Do I have a second?
Well, I have to ask and make a friendly amendment. And would you entertain that at the conclusion of the fellowship, whatever the period is that the city attorney decides, whether it's 12 months or 24 months or otherwise, at the conclusion of the fellowship, that person will have to be let go or retained as a continuing fellow or classified employee? How does that work? They become an unclassified forever?
They could become unclassified for the next 10 years if that's what the budgeting requires us to do. So I don't want to put that kind of a limitation on it because we are not the people to do the budget. We have to. Then you have to run for city council, and that carries with it a whole bunch of other issues.
So your motion is approve
except the qualification would be they have to be a licensed attorney at the time of the hire.
I'll second it.
Okay. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
No.
Commissioner GHAZARIAN?
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Yes.
Chairman Okian?
Yes. Okay. Motion passed.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. City Attorney, does that one vote approve both of these items, both the specification and the declaration of this as an unclassified position?
My motion was to approve both at the same time.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So, pass. What's next?
Job bulletin for approval, fire engineer.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a job bulletin for approval for the position of fire engineer, obviously in the fire department. As the Commission is aware, all safety promotional recruitment bulletins do require Commission approval. This bulletin is fully consistent with the approved class specification for fire engineer. We do want to bring forward a couple of facts, a couple changes in the selection process that are being put forth. Traditionally, the fire engineer is run, there's written exam and then a very extensive performance exam consisting of anywhere from 5 to 6 individual events, of which each candidate must pass each of those events. The last couple of administrations of that, we have utilized what's known as a acting captain's exam, and that's because this is a position that will fill in for captains when they're either out or whatever. We put them through a series of exercises to determine their preparation to supervise, essentially. We're proposing that be removed from the examination process, and the other part of it is there's a process known as drafting, which it's been part of the performance exam for this position for as long as I can remember. And drafting, if you're not aware of what that is, it involves attaching a mechanism from the fire engine into a pool of water to generate a source of water to fight fires. It's a very rarely used practice. I mean, almost never happens. And the proposal would be to remove both of those items from the exam and keep the other traditional components of the performance exam, which include a pre-check of the apparatus, a hydrant event, an aerial ladder truck, and a driving portion. So,
okay. Any questions?
Move to approve. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, I have a question. So the performance is 75%, correct?
yes.
Of which 10% is driving, 30% is the aerial ladder truck, 35% is hydrant exercise, 25%. If you fail the 10% in your performance and your written is 25% and everything else is 100% except you failed at 10%, which gives you about 90%, you still fail.
That is correct. That is correct. This is not easy stuff.
So you could be 90%, but because you failed that one test at 10%, you fail everything.
Sounds like Miss Hunanian needs to come and tell us why.
She just left the building.
This is Battalion Chief Brian Ritchie.
Wonderful.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, so that 10%...
Just introduce yourself, please.
Chief Brian Ritchie, Battalion Chief Brian Ritchie, in Training and Safety Section.
So why is that, Chief?
You're talking about the 10% for the
Yes,
pre-check event.
that he was,
I just picked up 10%
that he
it's
put
the
out
smallest
there.
one I can find.
Yeah. The pre-check, while it is an important event, it's a very small event, and we've never actually had anybody fail that event. So,
But it could. They could fail it.
They could potentially
and
fail
still
that.
get a 90% and still not be able to be eligible.
I
right?
would say, in my experience as an engineer and then a captain that dealt with training a lot of the time, is that if you would fail that event, you're very likely you're going to fail the rest of the exam.
So, forgive me. So what you said is nobody has ever failed it, or very
No one has
rarely.
ever failed the pre-check, but it is a very important thing we need to test because it's state law required for a person to drive fire apparatus.
Forgive me because this is not my area. Is this like if my daughter's going to go take a driver's test and this is the turning on the ignition?
Yeah, so if your daughter's taking
Putting
the
a seat
driver's
belt?
test and she gets in the car and the tires are flat, the rater's probably going to fail her for not knowing her vehicle's
So
not
it's
safe.
the obvious, the 10% is the obvious that anybody in your line of work, if they don't pass, then
Yeah.
they're not really going to pass the other 90% either.
Most definitely. The pre-check, I don't want to say it's basic. It's the most basic portion of the test. Whereas if you can't pass that because it's an algorithm, you walk around the apparatus. It's a check sheet in your head. You practice. If we don't have it, people wouldn't study it and focus upon it. And it is the job of an engineer every morning to do that pre-check on the apparatus. So we want to make sure before they step in that seat as a full-time position, they're doing it properly.
Okay.
Commissioner Devine had a question.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous when I see components of an exam being omitted, and I certainly understand the reason for omitting them. I mean, that's not Rhodes Scholar work. The thing that I want to make sure is, and it's not in this bulletin or the report as we have in others, has the GFA been notified of this? And if you...
Yes, sir. GFFA has been apprised of this, and they've looked at the bulletin, and we've actually... Yeah, we've gotten no concerns. We've actually gotten feedback from them. They typically do offer their opinion, but this has been something we've discussed quite extensively.
Okay.
And if I could just add a little more to Commissioner Carrian's question. There actually is a provision in our civil service rules, Roman numeral 4, section 10B, which talks about weights of examinations, and it essentially says each examination component shall be given a weight in relation to the total value. In ascertaining the fitness of the applicant, each component shall be graded in weight. An applicant who fails to attain a minimum raw score converted to 70% on any examination component shall be considered disqualified on the entire selection process. So,
But that 10% would still make it 70%, wouldn't it?
but they have
No,
to.
you got to get 70% of the 10%.
And honestly, if my firefighter can't identify 4 flat tires, I don't want him in that truck. So, do I have a motion, please?
I made that motion, and
Okay,
I
do we have a
should have been
second?
allowed.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner Carrion?
Yes.
Chairman Ukian?
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Next item, please.
Before we go to the
Yes.
next item, I do want to say that there's always an open invitation to members of this commission if they'd like to observe any of these types of selection processes. This one in particular is pretty much involved, very labor intensive.
I'd like to see Commissioner Gazarian go up that ladder.
About a year and a half ago.
I will supervise you going up that ladder. How's that?
I can't even get on the truck, sorry.
You see a
sir.
picture of him when he was a few years ago, he could probably go up that ladder without a problem.
I'm sorry. Okay.
This is more than going up a ladder. But about a year and a half ago, when Commissioner Devine was chair, he asked to observe what was our battalion chief's exam, and I think he was fairly impressed with the extent and thoroughness of that exam. And you look at a job bulletin and you see a salary on there, and you think, wow, that looks like a lot of money. But you see what each of these candidates has to go through to pass each and every one of these rotations. It's quite impressive.
It is. It is. And I've attended one, and it is absolute. That's why I'm saying I'd like to see him. I couldn't even get on the truck, so.
I will send a follow-up email to the commission, but this performance exam is going to be held on April the 4th.
Okay.
If any of you are
We're all
interested in coming and observing, and we might even buy a lunch.
Oh,
So,
boy.
I might be out of the country, unfortunately, but if not, I will attend. And for the record, when I look at these salaries, I don't think it's a lot of money. I think it's not enough money.
It's not enough.
Besides the point.
It's not even enough. Okay, next item. Next item.
Job bulletin for approval. Firefighter recruit paramedic lateral.
Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a bulletin for approval. This is a firefighter recruit / paramedic / lateral. We are forever seeking new and innovative ways of staffing our fire department, and it gets more and more challenging as we compete against other fire departments for these coveted positions. Right now, we have a particular need for paramedics, and as the report indicates, that you'll see probably 85% of our calls are medically related. We've traditionally, and the traditional model of hiring firefighters is to hire them as firefighter recruits, train them in all the various areas of firefighting and emergency medical service, and then at some point later on, maybe a year or 2 or 3 years later, solicit from those firefighters anyone who's interested in becoming a paramedic. And traditionally, we've done it that way. And what it does is, we end up taking somebody out of the fire station, putting them in the paramedic program, which takes a minimum of 6 months. The city has to absorb the cost of training that individual, and while they're pulled off the line, we have to backfill that position with someone else, which incurs overtime costs. So it's quite expensive to hire people, then train them as paramedics, versus hire them as paramedics and bring them in and get them on the schedule as quickly as possible. So that's sort of the intent of this. We'd like to modify what would be the traditional bulletin for firefighter recruit and paramedic to require the license coming in the door. And the minimum requirements state that they must be currently employed as a firefighter paramedic with some city municipal fire department, and have at least 1 year of experience with a municipal fire department in order to apply for this. And that, because that differs from the approved class specification for fire, when we hire firefighters, that's why it's being brought before the commission. So.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Question.
Yes.
I would feel more comfortable if we can just add something to the desired qualifications. Because we keep telling the members of community, because for the past 14 years I've had the privilege of being here on and off, and Mr. Doe knows that one of my biggest issues is that we don't have enough bilingual or Armenian, Korean firefighters in the city compared to the public as a whole. And one of the things that I think will encourage people is if they see that. If you can say bilingual ability in languages spoken in the community like Armenian, Korean, Hispanic, and Filipino, I think when you actually put in something like that in there, the community kind of sees the Armenian, Hispanic, Korean, Filipino. I think they're more likely to say, wow, I fit more into this one category. They're looking for me, and you might actually get more applicants from those communities when you name them specifically.
We should also add English in there too. As part of the requirement. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Your point is well taken.
Absolutely.
And we can indicate such prominently on this bulletin somewhere. And again, it's not an ethnicity issue. It is a skills issue of bilingual abilities. And actually, there is a premium pay for that.
I understand, and that's the reason that
negotiated with the GFFA.
To have the actual bulletin specifically mention those names, I think would be actually very desirable for me, very important to me. This way, then we are telling the community we want you to come and join us in these positions.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I have a question.
Question. Yes.
Under the heading citizenship, it says U.S. citizenship or a permanent alien who is eligible and has applied for citizenship at least 1 year prior to final filing date. Am I to accept that to mean that a permanent legal resident who has not applied for citizenship because perhaps they do not meet the minimum standards of 5 years residency to apply for citizenship, they cannot apply for this position?
That's my understanding, yes.
What is that based on? Does that not pose an equal protection problem constitutionally? And has the city attorney's office signed off on this kind of a declaration, which will go out to the public and it will, for all essential purposes, limit the pool, but also potentially expose the city for criticism, if nothing worse? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there.
Don't we have that on most of our?
I have never seen that. I've never seen that. If it's been there,
that's a good point.
I've never seen that.
That's a good point.
That's a problem. At least
there must be an explanation.
But
we're going to be getting right now.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Deputy Chief Bill Lynch, the Fire Department. In speaking with Ms. Hunanian, that's been in every fire department bulletin.
And
what is the
other
basis
departments
for it?
I believe that language was put in before my time. I would have to defer to Mr. Doyle to assist me with the history on that.
I do not have the history on that specific requirement.
I will be voting against this because of my concerns, with no offense meant to anyone, because I am genuinely concerned about that language, and I would like at least the city attorney's office for the city of Glendale to chime in or to somehow bolster the validity, the legal validity, which I don't expect you to address, of that kind of a declaration.
Instead of rejecting it, should we maybe...
As a clarification, I've pretty much seen that on every single one. But nevertheless, I think, but Commissioner Garian is saying not to hold up the position. I mean, the part that you were uncomfortable, can you explain that part about?
This does not allow anyone who's a permanent legal resident to apply for the job unless they've applied for citizenship already. And that is not my understanding of a requirement for someone to be in I mean, we allow permanent legal residents to serve in our armed forces. So I have a serious reservation with this.
Does this need to be approved tonight, this item?
I see the filing period would be March the 13th, which is next month.
Can we postpone it for the next one, or can we take?
Get a legal opinion on that particular item.
Yeah, just to open ourselves into, yeah, exactly.
Mr. GHAZARIan, I'm 100% with him on this. I don't know how long we've had it on, but this really creates a major, it limits a huge amount of people from applying. And second, I don't understand, I didn't even see that, but the legalities of why we would limit
I think you guys have a good point. Can we go and postpone this until you guys get a legal opinion on this? Because this is a broad, I mean, this is something so, it far outweighs anything that we can do here.
Yeah, we would need to do some
Yeah, I
research.
think because they have very
origin of
valid
this.
points, and these,
I mean,
this can cause a whole bunch of other problems. If we can go ahead and extend.
Let me just add one more thing, if you don't mind,
No.
Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no.
Mr. Doyle, if it turns out that you need to have this done in the next 10 days, let's say, or 2 weeks.
Special meeting.
I'll have no issues of coming back here for just a special meeting for 10 minutes to get this bulletin approved the way with the legal opinion on it. So if we need to do it earlier, just call a special meeting, let us all come in here, and we'll get it approved and without any problem whatsoever.
Well, I'll coordinate that with Mr. Doyle. So we're going to go ahead and push this out for next meeting, and we'll get the opinion on that point.
Good point.
Okay, what's next item?
Reports?
Mr. Doyle.
The last item I see is the past due evaluations. We
Okay.
have, it appears, none that have gone second notice. So
Magic.
we have
It's called
first ones.
magic.
So the point is getting through. Okay.
It's getting through.
Any questions or comments on that? Okay, what's next?
Civil Service Commission, staff comments?
Do we have any?
I have a quick request.
Okay.
A while back, we talked about maybe having the Civil Service Commission rules come to us if we will need to make any amendments, additions, comments on it. Then it would go back to the employee associations, and then the employee associations could make comments on it, and then we can have it actually revised. Could we bring that sometime in April of this year, maybe, for us to review them, make any adjustments, amendment, comments to it? Then it will go back to the employee associations to see what comments they have, and then it will come back to us for a vote, and then we can have the new revised rules and regulations?
Certainly, Commissioners. Again, I'm not sure if the request is for staff to propose changes or to solicit changes from the Commission, or simply to
I think
review the
we'll
rules.
bring it to that meeting, first meeting in April, with any changes that the staff wants to, would recommend. Commission will make some recommendation at that point. Then all those recommendations, I'm assuming, has to go to the employee association and all the associations that we have. They will make some comments on it. Then it will come back to us for a final vote as a revised new Civil Service Commission rules.
Okay, let's take one thing at a time. Let's go ahead and, if we can calendar it for us to at least be able to talk about it and go over it, and then at that point we can.
Yeah,
get it
then
on
we'll
to-
decide what to
Okay.
do at that point.
All right, yes.
There was an inquiry that came up at the last meeting regarding the period of time that a chairperson may serve. We can certainly agendize this and bring this back for a longer discussion, but I did want to point out that in your rules, Rule 12, Section 1 states that the Commission shall organize by electing one of its members, chairperson and one vice chairperson, who shall each serve for a period of 1 year and until successors are duly elected and qualified. And there's a reference to the charter.
So there is no specific date that the change has to take place. It's one. Okay, perfect.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay, I think that covers what everybody wanted. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we're adjourned.
I've never seen this before.
I've seen.